Good morning. Welcome back to the Garden Gurus Live. It's a wonderful day here. It looks a little bit grey outside, but I think we're going to have a nice day. So I hope you're having a nice day also. I'm Joanne Harris, and it's great to be back here on this Friday morning. We have a very exciting show lined up for you today. We're going to welcome the very last of the spring. Let's start again. I'm sorry. It's the last week of spring, and today we're going to be showing the Garden Gurus team are back again and feel a bit sentimental as they reminisce and reflect on the past seasons of the Garden Gurus. Instead of the regular Garden Gurus show, we have a special episode of the Garden Gurus Best Of, celebrating 20 years. That's quite a feat, I think. There will be some throwbacks on some of our favourite stories from the past, as well as some exciting new stories. We'll be also playing an exclusive sneak peek of episode 1 of the Garden Gurus Best Of show, premiering next Sunday on Channel 9 for our WA viewers. We also have another huge deal for you on a great Anthurium collection today by the the Garden Express team. And they'll be here to tell us all about this amazing plant. Later, I'll be sharing with you my plant of the week. And of course, don't forget to ask your gardening questions on the live chat to give you a chance to win some prizes. Make sure you include your location. It makes it much easier for me to be able to answer the question. But right now, we're going off to see Dr. Buggerlugs, and he's going to be talking to us about some advice for citrus leaf miner. Good listening.
So we've just been out in the garden in between the rain and found some distorted leaves. Citrus leaf miner. This is a particularly difficult insect to control. My best tip on this one is prune out the old damage. As we're coming into spring now, we're going to find the new foliage is developing, and this is the time the moths will arrive and start laying eggs on the foliage. Once they lay the eggs on the foliage and the little larvae hatch, then they're sort of impervious to most chemicals. So for citrus leaf miner, my tip is definitely the oils. This is an example of a white oil. This is mainly designed for indoor plants. Citrus leaf miner, you're actually going to need something bigger. These pump packs are really good. We don't want more pests like this coming in, so biosecurity is a shared responsibility. Everybody needs to play their part. By downloading the My Pest Guide Reporter app, take some photos, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible and let you know what pest you have, if it's a biosecurity threat, and if it is, we'll do our best to contain it or eradicate it before it becomes endemic like this one is.
I think he's right. But shared responsibility. So if you do find that you've got citrus leaf miner and you're not sure what to do with it, go and seek some advice out, because it's well worth getting rid of. All right, so let's jump into some questions straight away and get as many as we can answered. The first one comes from Carl, and unfortunately we're not sure where he is, but I have a feeling he's possibly in WA. It says, I have this ugly looking beetles in my healthy lawn. I'm just wondering what they're called and how to treat it to get rid of them. They kill the smaller black ones and burrow mounds of soil onto the grass. Okay, so these are commonly known as sandgropers. They're actually not a sandgroper. They're more related to in the cricket family, but they have these amazing, really strong front legs, and you'll find them under the ground, and they tunnel. Quite often at the garden centre, if we pick up pots that have been sitting down on the ground, then there's a tunnel underneath them. They don't do a lot of damage, but they can eat away at the finer roots when they're down there. Trying to get rid of them is a little bit harder because the sandgroper is generally under the soil. Most of the damage that sandgropers do are in crops. So, wheat, barley, things like that. And the farmers tend to get rid of them that at seeding time, when they're seeding, they put something into it then, some insecticide into the actual seed, into the bucket of seed. And that's how they get rid of it. I would suggest that perhaps something into the soil, perhaps a granular type of insecticide would be the best, but they don't do a huge amount of damage. You can hear them and see them more at night time also. So maybe go out and collect a whole bunch of them, and look for where they're actually living. So many of them, you'll find them underneath things, and that's where you'll be able to dig them out easier. So they're a sandgroper. Thanks, Carl. And now Tanya is also, it's unknown where she's from, but what a great photo. So this is her cordyline and it's flowering. And she's asking, how often does this happen? And she said it's very smelly. I've not ever actually smelt one, so I'm not sure what the smell is. And what's smelly to some people is beautiful to others. So maybe some more information on that would be great. If anyone's got some experience, send it in. Okay, so the flower, they usually flower once a year if they're in enough sunlight. So if they don't have enough sun, or if it's too cold, or if you have a real infestation of aphids or thrips, that will stop them from flowering. However, they do flower. And this one here you can see is a creamy white one. And they flower in all sorts of hues right through to purple, generally in summertime. Keep in mind that the flowers are toxic to pets. So if you've got cats and dogs that are interested in plants, it's not one that most animals are interested in, but if you do have a very curious animal, it would be best to get rid of the flower head at least. Cut the flowers off when they're finished, but let it go to seed first because it's bird attracting, so it brings in the birds into your garden also. But yes, they do flower generally once a year and generally in summertime. It's a pretty fancy looking flower you've got on yours, Tanya. Okay, so now Melbourne, and Gray has asked, hey team, what's happening with my lavender javelin? Have trimmed them back by a third after flowering, however the browning continues. So Gray, this is a root rot. It generally happens from when there's too much water or when the soil doesn't drain well enough. And I see you've got some fabulous mulch on your soil. So with the amount of rain that you guys have been having in Melbourne, I would suggest that that's what it is, that it's cold, the plants aren't drying out, and the water is staying in the soil. It's not always, it's not great to cut them back. You should leave that for the moment. But I would suggest that perhaps putting them into a pot, digging them up, put it into a pot and get it into some really good sunshine. If in fact you've got it in a really high sunshine area, you might find that it'll, over the next couple of weeks, if the rain stays away, you might find that it dries out enough. But otherwise, the root rot is going to take it and you're not going to have much luck with it. So, yeah, just keep in mind that lavender needs a really good hot position. So, hey, Tyson. It's Tyson again Tyson is from Baronia in Victoria. Can I plant the Nemesia carnival mixed seeds in the ground or somewhere else? Can you please give me some tips and advice? Well, yes, you can plant these in the ground. Nemesias are very easy to grow. I would be doing them about now. It's warm enough for them to go in the ground. You could put them into a pot if you wished, and grow them in pots. They look fabulous around your patio and things like that. So yes, you can plant them in the ground or in a pot. Of course, in a pot, I would probably use a seed raising mix if I was you, and maybe settle them in with a half strength of something like a sea salt or a fish emulsion of some sort. But otherwise, pretty easy to grow, Tyson. I think they'll look good. Okay, Hannah. And again, we're unsure of where Hannah's from, but I love Hannah loves her hedges, and she has one growing under a tall tree out the front. It has curly leaf with its new growth, and it has big bare patches starting to form. I have fed it blood and bone and sprayed the leaves with plant food. Please help me. What can I do to save it? Okay, well, it probably or possibly, we don't know where you're from, Hannah, but this time of the year, I would imagine that you've got quite a few bare patches starting to form from perhaps an insect infestation. So it could have been that you had some scale on it. I don't know if you've noticed scale. Scale can be a little black bug. It can be a white one. There's lots of different types of scale, but you should have noticed that on the stems if it was there. Sometimes they're so small, little black caps with the bugs underneath them, that you're not going to see them as well. But if you do have them, then you'd need to spray that with white oil. And it could well be that the curly leaf is from thrip. Thrip will attack the bud of the leaf while it's still it's curled up, and then it pierces through the leaf. So as the leaf uncurls, there's all these little bubbly bits all over it. So it could well be that. Or it could be something, if your hedge is of the lily pilly, one of the lily pilly varieties, you may well have what they call psyllid. And that makes these little curly bits, or not so much curly, what I would call little dimples all through the leaf. If it's more dimpled than it is curly, then you've probably got psyllid, so you need to have a look at it. Blood and bone is quite a good fertilizer. We don't use it as much in WA now because they've reduced the amount of phosphorus that you can put into it, so it doesn't have the same oomph that's needed. However, a good mineral fertilizer on your soil, and yes, you can spray it with some plant food. I would possibly also, once the weather is more continuously warm, I would probably try cutting it back by a third only, and that way you may induce the bare patches to start coming back. Check for bugs, cut it back by a third, and make sure you've got some good fertilizer and adequate water for the summertime, and hopefully that will come back for you. Okay, so we're now on the Gold Coast, or as Jay calls it, Goldie. Just want to know, what can I use to get rid of crabgrass? I live on the Goldie and having it come up through the lawn. Lastly, we also have very thick grass. It doesn't grow high but spreads and is very thick, and the strands of the grass are coarse and stiff. All right, so I would suggest that we'll start with the last part of that, and I would suggest that you've possibly got a type of buffalo, if it's a very thick grass and it's more running grass. And I think mostly on the Gold Coast, you guys have more like a fescue grass, which is tufted grass, so it's taller. Whereas here in the West, we grow more buffalo grass, which is lower and it is wider. There's new varieties that are much softer, that they call it a soft buffalo. So it's a little bit more comfortable than the old-fashioned one. So I think that's perhaps what you've got. Now, if you've got crabgrass coming up, one of the best things to do is to mow it. Crabgrass can throw seed, thousands of seed from one plant, in fact. So what you want to do is mow it before it starts seeding. And that way you'll at least get next year's generation. You'll reduce them somewhat. There is a pre-emergent crabgrass herbicide that you can use. So if you mow it, mow it and then cut it out. So getting a little knife and cutting around, it's got quite an extensive root system, but if you can pull those out, you then got to make sure that you've got some good soil where because the roots are quite big, so you'll pull quite a bit out. Make sure that you've got some good soil there, and that you put maybe a couple of runners of that grass over that area, because the more patches you have in your grass, the more weeds are going to come up. So you want to really make sure that you've got good coverage, okay? And then after you've done that, for next year, apply a crabgrass herbicide. It's called a pre-emergent, and it'll mean that you'll reduce it by quite a lot. So what you need is a healthy lawn with very little spaces, and you'll have far less weeds next time. Okay, so Jenny has asked, how far can I plant a silver princess eucalypt from my house fence? I have a small yard. The silver princess or the CZ are really beautiful little trees. So they're very weeping trees. They're not particularly wide. They're 3 to 4 meters wide, and they have a very shallow root system. So one thing you want to do, if it's in a small yard, it's possibly not as windy as what it would be if it was in a bigger yard. But you really do want to try and get get it so that it's not in a windy position, but also you want to have a look at the width. So if it's 3 to 4 meters wide, then you would want it at least, let's say 4 meters, we'll go maximum. Then you would want it 2 meters away from any structure to have clearance for it. Now, the Silver Princess, one of the beautiful things about it is that they weep, and they weep really beautifully. Now, you don't want to prune them too much. You've got to be careful when you prune them, because you can lose some of that beauty of them when you prune off and it goes in the wrong direction or something. So given that it's got shallow roots, they're not dangerous. It's not going to rip up your paving or anything like that. The roots are not strong enough to do that sort of thing. But I would still be aware of the canopy and what it needs, as opposed to just the roots. So yes, 3 or 4 meters wide, and you can plant it at least, at the most, 2 meters you want. Thanks, Jenny. That was a good question. Chris is from Currum Downs, Victoria. Help, he says. My almond tree, which is full of nuts, has fallen over in this terrible weather. The outer husks have not dried yet. What can I do to save them? The only way we can get the tree back into the ground is to cull it back, and we'll lose all the nuts. Yeah, I'm afraid that's all you can really do. You know, it's almond nuts, when they're not ripe, in fact, can be poisonous if they're too green. So I would probably say to you, I'm the bearer of bad news today, Chris, and you probably are best if you look at saving the tree rather than the nuts for this year alone. Maybe just go out and find a good supplier of nuts and buy some. All right. Albany, we're down in Albany, which is very southern tips of West Australia. And Nathan has asked, well, Nathan says he loves the show. That's fantastic. I'm glad you enjoy it, Nathan. I've sowed some parsley seeds and just wondering how long they're going to last for and how much room they need in a pot. Depends what sort of parsley you're going to sow also. So there's what they call a curly parsley, and there's also what they call the Italian, the flat parsley, the flat-leafed parsley. Now, if you're going to grow the flat-leaf parsley, you need a pot at least 300 millimeters wide, because it's or 30 centimeters. It's a big plant. It can grow up to almost a meter if it's got enough soil. So you'd probably only want one plant in a 30 centimeter pot. But if it's the curly leaf, you can probably put 3 or 4 plants in that size. Now, how long they last? Well, they're just an annual. However, as they come up, sometimes they will start flowering even in after a short time of being in the ground. So when I see the flower head come up, I usually just take that off, and that way you'll find that it continues the plant. You'll get more and more leaves. The more leaves you take off, the more they're going to produce. So it just depends how much you use it, how well it's looked after. Make sure that it gets adequate water, and I'd probably give it morning sun if it's in a pot rather than all-day sun. Whereas if it's in the ground, you can give it all-day sun. Parsley is a very hardy plant. Just thinking of your time also, through the summertime, if you're having to look after lots of pots, it can be it can be harder. All right, so now we're into Vic Park, and Janet has asked, I'm not good with plants, but I was hoping to grow a nice little vegetable herb garden. What's impossible to kill? Nothing's impossible to kill, I'm afraid, Janet. However, there are lots of things that you could use. Now, I would probably, if you're just starting to grow, I would grow things that you like to eat, but some of the more simple things. So think about having things like rosemary, thyme, sage, parsley, all of those ones that you're going to use. Basil in the wintertime, basil in the summertime, coriander in the wintertime. Any of those are really quite easy to grow. I think what you have to consider is the position of where you're going to put your veggie garden, and then also the soil. So make sure that you've got good compost in the soil, something that's going to add to the microbes and help the plant establish really good root systems. And make sure you've got some mulch on top of that. then a good fertilizer, and go out and check on your veggie garden every couple of days. Make sure that the bugs haven't got to it. And then if they do, give your garden centre a call and ask them the question, what am I doing wrong? What can I do right? Look, garden centre staff are there to answer all these questions and like to be able to be involved in your garden. So don't hesitate to do that and make sure that you get some help along the way. So good luck with that, Janet. Ned, who's in South Australia, what is the best natural way to keep cabbage moths away from my awesome veggies? Okay, Janet, you need to talk to Ned. He's got awesome veggies. Okay, so in the meantime, though, Ned, there are cabbage moths. There's actually some that you can buy. We sell them at the garden centre. Have a look on the website and you'll at least be able to see what they look like. But they're little plastic moths on a long stick. Now, moths are territorial. So if you put these around your garden, they usually, and because they're very light, they'll flap in the wind, and therefore the moths think that the area has been taken over by another family, so they usually leave. So yeah, have a look on the website, on the Guildford Town Garden Centre website, and you'll be able to see the photos, and then you'll find that somewhere in your neighbourhood, I'm sure you'll have some of the garden centres will have them. If not, purchase them through that and we can post them out to you. Now we're in Ringwood, which is in Victoria in Melbourne, and Lauren is asking, I'm wondering if you have any tips to get my tomatoes going a bit better. I've planted them out due to this crappy weather we've had. They're still really small. Yeah. Look, sorry, Lauren, in the cold weather, I've been holding off putting tomatoes in yet. It's really hard when the weather has been turning like it has in Melbourne and getting cold again. So the plants start to grow when it's nice and warm on a few days in a row. And then all of a sudden we get that really cold weather again and quite dank and wet. And you'll find that the plants just stop. In fact, you can end up with some root rot, or it's too cold and you'll get some black spots on the leaves. You'll notice that. Otherwise, I think what you should probably do is make sure that you've got some good fertilizer. Keep the plants as well drained as possible. If they're in the ground, it could be difficult. You might find that they don't grow as well. When you plant a tomato also, make sure that you plant it when normally we would say plant anything just at the same level that the grower has done when you pick it up from the retail place. And you'd plant it at the same level that the soil is in the pot. But with tomatoes, you don't. You want to plant them much lower, and they'll give you a much bigger root system, which will help them through the cooler weather when they're starting to grow, but also right through that really hot weather that we'll be getting soon. So there's possibly not a lot you can do. You could perhaps try some sea salt, half-strength sea salt on them, or a good tomato fertilizer, probably half strength at this time, and see if that works for you. Yeah, it's the weather, I'm afraid. There's not a lot you can do. Lauren in Ringwood has also asked, how do I feed and care for passion fruit best? I have one planted last year and another planted this year. I'm hoping to get some fruit for this year. Any tips? Yes, certainly. They hate being planted underneath. They don't like their roots being messed around with. So you don't want to start planting other vegetables and things underneath them, because then you're going to be affecting the little feeder roots. So keep it so that there's it's pretty clear. Mulch it well. They do have shallow roots. That's one of the reasons they don't like being planted around underneath. Look out for aphids and any sort of insect. Thrip like to get into them also. So keep an eye out for those and treat them for that. And they like to be fed. So give them a good liquid fertilizer every now and again, and every 6 weeks or so, give them something like Grow Safe. Give them a good fertilizer, and they should fruit for you really well. Nothing like a passion fruit straight off the vine. Okay, so we're going to head up to Brisbane, and Sam has asked, he says, hello, Joanne, you look radiant today. Thank you, Sam. That's very nice of you. I was a little bit concerned about this new camera and I might look too radiant. Anyway, Sam is wondering, what your favourite plant is. Well, Sam, it kind of depends what day it is, or what week it is as to what my favourite plant is. I guess I would say my favourite plant for such a long time is the iris. I love irises. And I think it has something to do with this fabulous grandmother I had who used to grow irises. But I do love all sorts of plants. In fact, I'm finding new ones all the time. Today's plant of the week is a brand new release, and I could probably say today it's my favourite plant. Sam, I wonder what yours is. Okay, thanks for the compliment, Sam. That was really lovely. We're back in West Australia, and Christine is in Stirling, and she's asked just a quick question about my passion fruit vine. It has grown like crazy and now has a few flowers. I wanted to trim it back, but I'm unsure whether I should do it now because of the flowers setting fruit. I wouldn't do it now, Christine. I would wait until it's finished flowering. Otherwise, you're quite right. You could cut off some of the fruiting, but you could also interfere with just the whole plant might not like it at this time of the year, especially if I know in the next couple of days we're going to get some rain, but then after that we've got some really hot weather coming in. So leave it be for the moment and cut it back later on. So we're staying in WA and we're going all the way up to Ocean Reef, and Agnes has asked, I have these little insects flying around most of my plants. How do I get rid of them? Well, Agnes, I'm assuming you mean your plants inside. Let's say you are, and then we'll attack the ones outside too. So if you're looking at the ones inside, it's probably fungus gnats that you've got. And that is a clear sign that you're overwatering your plants. And therefore I would suggest that you use some, say, neem oil is a good one. I haven't used, but I have read that cinnamon on top of your pot, on top of the soil, helps also. I haven't done it, but I have read quite a bit of people on Facebook saying that they use cinnamon and it works well. So I guess you could give that a go too. But neem oil I know works really well for you. So talking of gorgeous plants, I think we have Rowan from the Garden Express group is here. Hey, Rowan.
Hey, Joanne. How you going?
Really well. How's it over in Melbourne today?
It's actually really nice. The rain sort of stopped for a little while, but I think the weekend's supposed to be wet a little bit again. But at the moment, sun's out and it's looking really nice.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's good. You guys deserve it. You've had an awful lot of rain, haven't you?
We really have, yeah. But it's hopefully we can dry things out, and we'll get into summer. I mean, summer in a few days, and definitely doesn't feel like it.
No, it doesn't here either. Unfortunately, though, summer is coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So today we've got some really lovely plants.
We do. You were talking about your favourite plants. These are probably one of my favourite plants at the moment. I'm surrounded by them, so we've got some to show. But these are the beautiful Anthuriums. You can see there that there is such a beautiful plant. We've got some different colours to show people, but you can see just how full and beautiful that is. Coming into Christmas with the reds and whites, it's a beautiful centerpiece for a Christmas table or something like that.
Yeah, it's just that little bit of a step up from your poinsettias, isn't it? Yeah.
They're beautiful. And then because there's some, you can see there on the screen, you've got some deep reds and some beautiful whites. It kind of still has that Christmassy vibe about it, which is really nice.
Absolutely. And they flower and flower and flower, don't they? They just keep doing that.
Yeah. They flower for a long time. And the plants that we've been able to source, which from the nursery that you're seeing there on screen, are just so full and beautiful. I've had one on my kitchen table for probably a good 6 weeks now, and it just continues to flower. It's a stunning plant.
Yeah. It's one of those plants that also filters the air, so it's a good plant to have inside for health reasons as well.
Yeah,
I've actually for the last couple of years at Christmas used these instead of poinsettias, and I found that they lasted for me a lot longer, especially in the heat that we get here in West Australia. Inside, and
the other thing to note about it is they because of the root system, it's kind of similar to an orchid in a lot of ways. The roots, it males particularly well, so it holds up in the post beautifully. But there's another one you can see. It's just stunning.
That's stunning. That's beautifully grown.
Yeah, very,
That's
very nice.
beautiful.
And this is what customers will get if they take advantage of our offer this week.
And I think when you see a plant growing as well as that too, you find that the roots, it's what they call a wrapper. They like to wrap around, like you say, like an orchid.
Yeah.
So that obviously has a fabulous root system on it.
Yeah, I pulled it out of the pot, and I'll get to it everywhere. But I don't know if you can actually see in there very well through there. But it's really beautiful.
Yeah,
You're not going to be disappointed if you decide to purchase one of those.
Now, how do you then post something like that, Rowan, when it's so big and healthy? They obviously come in like a box, do they?
Yeah, so we will sleeve it so to hold the foliage in, just to make sure that a plastic sleeve will go around the pot.
Yeah,
like you see in a supermarket or something like that, they're often sleeved. And then that'll go into a purpose-made box shipper, and the pot will get strapped in, so that if it happens to go upside down or be thrown around, God forbid, it will hold up. And because of the root system, it stays intact. So they really do male incredibly. So we've had no problems with them at all in terms of that side of things.
And with Christmas coming up, this is a great time to buy one from you, because it gives plenty of time for it to arrive in time for Christmas, and then get your table ready and get your decorations around these centerpieces.
Yeah. And better yet, we've put a large discount on them as usual. So they're going to get the plants that we just shown for regularly they're $26. It comes at a 130 ml pot, like I showed you. But we've reduced those by 25% for Guru's viewers, so down to just $19.90 for those for that type of plant.
So from $26.90 down to $19.90 for something of that quality.
Yeah,
that's good value.
It really is good value. I'll probably lose my job, to be honest, but that's what we've done.
No, we need you. Oh, look, thanks. Go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it is worth noting, we mentioned Christmas delivery. There's been a little bit of dramas with, particularly getting over to you guys in WA with the floods. I think some of the rail lines have been cut off. So Australia Post is saying for WA that in order to guarantee a Christmas delivery, orders need to be placed by the 5th of December. In order to make it over to you and guarantee. Not to say we won't ship past that. I think our date for last shipping to WA, Tas and Northern Territory, which are the quarantine states, is the 8th of December. And then we just hold it back, because obviously traditionally the weather would get warmer, but obviously Australia Post also are very busy at that time of time, and we don't want our plants getting caught in the mail in the heat. So if you don't get your orders in for WA now by the 5th, and for pretty much everywhere else by the 8th, we can't guarantee Christmas delivery, and we will hold it back just so that it's not stuck in Christmas mail until we get back. And we're not back until the 9th of January this year. So anything placed after that, we won't guarantee a delivery, and we will most likely, depending on the weather, hold it back until we get back, just so that it's going to arrive to the viewers in the best possible condition.
Oh, absolutely. That makes good sense. I mean, that's just good business practice. And, as a customer of yours, I appreciate that sort of thought that goes into it. It is a bit difficult at the moment. I think I've got some stock sitting in the pile on the railway line there. So it is more difficult. But we in West Australia are used to it. So, get your order in, get it in today. It's a 25% offer off what you normally, and you get red, white, green, burgundy, peach, orange, and
there's
pink.
a beautiful pink one. I've got a pink one here. I don't know if it shows through the thing, but it's a beautiful pink colour. And then the green one is really interesting. I've got one of those here too. So you can see there that the flower, it almost blends into the leaf, but obviously it's got the it's just something a little bit different. They're
I
all
love.
incredibly beautiful, and there is one that I don't have here, which is a bit more compact, and it has a much smaller
Yes,
flower, and it's a beautiful peach color.
beautiful. I've not seen a peach one. I do love the purple ones too. They're quite beautiful, and
Yeah, I
generally
don't
I
have one
think
to
they're
show you
smaller.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm a bit of a lover of green flowers, so
Yeah, they seem to be
yeah,
pretty popular. Those and the darker ones. So the chocolates are very popular at the moment. But it's
yeah.
it's beautiful.
Well, look, thanks for your time.
One thing also to note is
Yeah.
obviously the color does depend on the amount of light that it gets. So
Yes.
if you're putting it in a dark indoor situation, it may dull off a little bit, but generally a bit of sunlight will bring it back again, and you'll get the vibrant colors that I've been showing you this morning.
Yes, I should have said that. I live in an old home, 1901, which is darker. So I tend to keep them in the lighter and then bring them in to decorate.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Look, thank you very much for all your time this morning.
No, it's always a pleasure. Yeah, 1990, 130 ml pot. Get your orders in as soon as possible.
Yeah.
There's a big banner on the homepage. All you need to do is click on that, go straight through to the six or so that we've got available colours. There's a fair bit of stock, but it's not. There's not masses of stock, so I would recommend getting in quite quickly. Just go to the website, gardenexpress.com.au.
Thanks, Rowan. Appreciate your time. It's great. And the offer, 25% off Speth Films.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Joanne. Thanks. It's always a pleasure.
And you. Thank you. All right. So let's get back to the questions. And we're on Brisbane. Yagan has asked, what is the difference between compost and mulch, and what should I use for my roses? Okay, well, you need to use both. The difference between compost and mulch is compost is generally seen as like a concentrate that you put into the soil. And generally we say to people, dig your hole twice as wide as the pot, twice as deep as the size of the pot. And then a third of that hole can be compost. And you mix that through with the existing soil and then plant into that. So that's what you would do with a compost, or what is often also called a concentrate. And mulch is what you put on top. So mulch is what is going to keep the moisture in the soil, and it's going to keep the sun off the soil and the cold off the soil. It's going to help the soil keep warm in wintertime and cool in summertime. So yeah, you need to use both for your roses, and it's really well worth using it. And we're off to Townsville. And Ross has asked, after the Anthurium feature, what is the best potting medium? Thanks so much from beautiful Northern Queensland. Northern Queensland is beautiful, isn't it? So Anthurium, and I think I just realised I said spathiphyllums. It wasn't a spathiphyllum we were talking about. We were talking about Anthurium. Sorry about that, Ron. So the Anthurium, I would put it into a premium potting mix, but I would also probably put in maybe some perlite. You want to open it up. You want it almost to be like an orchid mix for an Anthurium, but not quite as open as an orchid where you use an actual, bark mix. So start with a premium potting mix and loosen it up, and that will be much easier, much better for you. All right. So from Down Under Fella, I think we've spoken to you before, and it's come in through YouTube, and his question is, or her question is the beach spider lily a bulb? I've owned my house for 18 months, and now is the first time it's flowered right after I decided it's coming, and they haven't given me the whole question here. Is the beach spider lily a bulb? I actually don't know what a beach spider lily is. I know what a spider lily is. So I'm going to assume that it's the same thing. And yes, it is a bulb. So it's a bulb that can be left in the ground in most places in Australia. Perhaps if you're right down in, say, Tasmania, or really high, so Tasmania for the really cold, up in the mountains where it's really cold, or even where it's very, very wet in the north. In Queensland, right. So he's from Northern Queensland. Thanks. The producers have just given me a bit of a hint here. So I would say to you that if you're in Northern Queensland, I would probably lift it unless you've got really sandy soil. And if you're calling it a beach spider lily, you possibly do. So if it's in really sandy soil, that means that it drains well and it's not going to get any root rot. And that's more what I would be concerned about. If you decide to lift it, dust it off with some sulfur, put it in a really dry spot, and then plant it again next autumn. Rachel is in Bunbury. And Rachel says, I've got fungus gnats in my outdoor herb garden. I don't think they're causing any damage to the plants, but do they have potential to? Fungus gnats do. It's not the actual gnat that's going to cause the problem. That's just annoying. That's just really annoying when you're sitting there with fungus gnats flying all around you, especially if it's an indoor one. Being outdoor, it's not going to annoy you so much. And it's not the gnats that do the problem with you. It is the larvae, the eggs. So if the larvae, as it's coming through, if there's a lot of it and it's in the soil, then what it will do is it has the potential to eat at the fine feeder roots of the plant and therefore either put the plant back, or if it's ignored and too much of it, you could actually then kill the plant too. So if it's in your herb garden, I would probably consider your watering practices. We get fungus gnats through fungus, and fungus is usually through too much water. All right. So I would consider how much you're watering, how well draining your soil is, and that way you might get rid of them. You can use neem oil, which I would probably do if they're in an outdoor setting especially, and that way you'll find you'll kill off the larvae and the eggs also. That's what you want to get rid of. So, Sarah, thanks for being so knowledgeable. We love the show here. Well, thanks, Sarah. I really appreciate that. I don't always feel so knowledgeable, and sometimes I stumble on my words. So just put up with that, and I'll give you as much as I possibly can. All right. So she's from Balgowlah Heights, and I cannot even pronounce it, I'm sorry, in Sydney, and a bit of an odd one. But I've recently gotten into making tea cocktails and putting dried roses in them. Oh, how beautiful. I've mixed the tea with pink gin. Oh, my goodness, I want an invite. And added to a rose ice cube. Would you recommend any other spirits for tea cocktails? And I can make my own dried flowers for the tea. No, I really don't know of what you would use alcohol-wise with dried flowers. I quite like the idea of the pink gin, and I guess you could use almost anything. I guess it depends on what you like to drink. I'm not sure, I'm sorry. But I might look into that one because it's an interesting one, mixing flowers with alcohol. All right, Louise is in Sydney. Could you please advise when to prune lavender? Also when to fertilize? All right, so lavender is pruned. I usually prune it as it's flowering. So you'll find that it'll throw a first flush up, and then under that flush, another two will come. So what I tend to do, instead of cutting them back and just cutting it round like that, I'll actually go in and cut each one down so that it then produces two, and so that the bush gets bushier and fat and more compact. Right. Then at the end of the season, which I would say not quite at the end of autumn, then prune it back by a third, but no more than that. And then leave it through winter. Do not have any cutting on it during winter time, and be careful of the amount of water that goes onto it. Then that's all I would do. I'm sorry, the page has moved. Also, when to fertilize. All right, so I would fertilize in springtime. So coming out of wintertime, give it a fertilize. Probably in the middle of summer, I'd give it a little bit more, but not too much. and then again in autumn, ready for it to go a little bit dormant through the winter time, and then it starts again. So thank you. Sorry about that, Louise. We just had a little bit of a technical issue and I lost my screen. Okay. Blair is in Victoria and he's asked, I've been planting some seeds and have noticed that they say sow in their final position. Is it not good to plant the seed in a smaller container and then transfer them? You can do both. A lot of places, there are the odd seed that you can't transplant easily, but if you put it into one of those eco cups, so you can put it into something that decomposes in the soil. So you're not having to then what we call prick it out of another pot and replace it, and hence having the possibility of damaging the root system. So try and get some of those little eco pots. There's also, years ago, they used to call them jiffy pots. And they were like little peat pots that were compressed, and when you put your seed on, and when you water them, they would expand, and then you place that straight into the ground. So if it does say that on that, I'd perhaps Google what seed you've got, make sure that it is a seed that can be planted into something and then pricked out, or get something like the eco cups or the jiffy pots and put it straight from where you're raising them straight into the ground that way. Okay, so we're back in Queensland and Denise has asked, I want to use this pot to plant my devil's ivy in, but it has no drainage hole. And I heard that you always must have drainage holes. Is that true? Absolutely, it's true, Denise. Look, the devil's ivy, especially, it won't like it to have wet feet, and therefore things like pots with no drainage, and even self-watering pots, there's many plants that don't like it because they still end up too moist at the bottom and too moist in the root system. So, but you can put holes in pots. You know, get the right drill, the right equipment with your drill bit. If it's terracotta, then get something that is suitable for drilling in that. I usually put a cross of sellotape in the middle of the hole, or where I want the hole to be, and the tape tends to hold it, and then I drill through that. And I've had less cracks and less damage to pots. But yes, always have a hole in the pot or you're going to have problems. Okay, so Ben, Wagga Wagga in New South Wales, and Ben has asked, hi Joe, my zinnia seedlings have been attacked by leaf miner. How do I treat them and will they survive this attack? Okay, so I would probably use with leaf miner something like a pest oil. There's one out there that's got Hippo Enhanced, and the acronym, I'm not exactly sure of what the acronym is, but it's a pheromone that's in the eco oil, in the oil, and it attracts the predator insects. So that means that you can spray that, the predator insects take over, and therefore you're not having to continually spray. You're bringing and attracting in what's going to do the job for you. They should survive. They may not. They're small. It's the beginning of the season. I guess in Wagga Wagga you're still getting up and down days too. Some are cold, probably some very wet weather. So I can't guarantee that they are going to survive, but I would give them a spray. If you've got some pest oil or some sort of oil, give them a spray. Don't spray them too heavily, but certainly do that. Linda, any tips on how to keep hordes of white cockatoos from raiding hundreds of green passion fruits, plus heavily laden branches? Rowdy, destructive little vandals. Oh, Linda, they can be a pain, can't they? Okay, so there was some research done quite a few years ago, just east of Perth, and they were using all sorts of things. And what they found, even with the cockatoos that aren't known to be extremely smart birds, they, like owls and crows and things, soon got used to what was going up there. So they were having to change all the time what they were doing. There are some wires that you can use, and it interferes with the flight plan of the bird, and they'll move away from it. Some people, you might notice old CDs that have been hung, and they're round and they spin so that they reflect the light, and that's supposed to help with the birds also. Netting. You can buy proper bird netting. That might help, that you put it over the passion fruit. It's probably one of the easier ones. Oh, you can buy owls with eyes that have got like crystal in them, and they reflect and glitter in the sunshine too. And owl being the predator, most birds are afraid of them. Not sure if cockatoos are afraid of owls, though. They're quite a big bird too, aren't they? But I would probably, if it was me, I would probably go for a net and do it that way. Good luck. I hope you don't lose too many of them. All right. So Christy Lee has asked, I've got pepino melon planted. Why would the leaves go yellow? There's a few reasons why pepinos would go yellow, Christy Lee. You can look at the position. It may well be that you've got the plant in a position that doesn't have enough sunlight, and therefore it'll go yellow. It'll go yellow if it's if it's cold, and in fact, it'll go yellow and drop all its leaves if it turns cold. And we have had those up and down days in most of Australia, are getting, warm days, cold days, warm days, cold days. And every time we get that cold night, you'll find things like pepinos just go, that's it, I'm finished. And they just drop their leaves. So you might find it's that. If the new leaves are yellow, if they're coming through yellow, you're probably lacking some sort of mineral, and I would suggest it's probably a micro mineral, and you need to get some good trace elements onto your plants. But it sounds to me like it's the old leaves, and I would say it's just that time of the year. We normally are really selling pepinos a lot at this time of the year. There's not a lot coming through from the growers yet, and I would suggest that their plants are doing the same, so they don't want to send them into the retailers. Okay, so now down into Tasmania, and James is saying, hello, Joanne. Love it when you host the live shows. Great to see you back. That's really nice of you, because Trevor's a heck of a presenter. So thank you very much. I was wondering what sort of mix you would use for a regular general potting mix. Okay, so I actually don't try and make my own potting mix. My grandmother and my great aunt, who I spent a lot of time in the garden with other than my parents, would make their own potting mix. But nowadays the potting mix is made to a formula, and it's a formula that's based on a recipe that is accepted at the Australian standards level. So I tend to buy, usually always, a premium potting mix. And you'll find that's got red ticks. I was trying to remember whether it's black or red. They have a red tick on them, and that's the premium one. Now, if you're wanting to plant seeds or something, like I know Tyson does a lot of, he would want to use a seed raising mix. It's got less fertilizer in it, so it's not going to damage the seed as it's germinating and coming through. Otherwise, if you're looking for something like a regular potting mix, where you're perhaps you're just going to plant some geraniums or something that grows really easily and doesn't need a lot of attention, then look for a regular potting mix. And the regular potting mix has the black ticks in it. There's 5 ticks at the bottom of the bag, and that shows you that they've been made to the proper recipe and that you're getting something that is of value. If you pay $2 or $3 or $5 even, or even $6 or $7 for a potting mix, you're getting one that hasn't been left long enough, and therefore the chances are that it could still be quite hot and burn the root system. Thank you. That was a great question. All right, so now we're going to look at a sneak peek at next week's WA episode of the Garden Gurus, best of episode number 1.
Gardeners love roses. They have been the backbone of ornamental gardens for centuries. So for the home gardener, selecting the perfect variety for their garden may feel a little overwhelming.
trees are the most important part of the environment, regardless of where you live. And managing the interaction of trees remains one of the biggest challenges in urban spaces.
These days, lawns play a big role in landscaping and are very much a source of pride for homeowners. So looking after them makes a lot of sense.
I'm looking forward to that. I love seeing Darren and Sue back on there too. Okay, so now talking of wonderful plants, I have a plant of the week. Now I'm going to read this because I looked for a common name of it and I couldn't find a common name. So it's called a rhodohypoxis. All right, rhodohypoxis Beverley. This is a brand new release, and I'm going to bring it up and I'm going to find there we go. Almost. No, it's not doing it for me. There it is. Okay, I hope you can see it. It is the most beautiful little flower. Now, this is a brand new release for WA, and I think throughout Australia. So the Beverley, I'll leave it up there. Maybe you can see it. I'll leave it there for you and put that. So the Beverley is a little perennial. It's a little grass. It only grows to about 20 centimeters, and it's wonderful in front of borders. All right, that's where you're going to want to plant it because it's not going to be very tall at all. It's good for pots as well, so you can use it in pots. There we go, that's better. I've gone all blurry when I had it up there. So it will grow in really well in pots, 20 to 25 centimeters. Although it's called a perennial, it's actually also it's herbaceous. So in the wintertime, it's going to go down under the ground, so you won't see it. And that's when you would put in something, to replace it. Of course, it stays in the ground, but then I would put something like lobelia over top of it. And that way you've got the gap is filled, but then the lobelia goes down as this comes back up in spring. Easy, just doesn't like to be in a heavy soil. So if you're in clay, you might want to plant it into a pot or make sure that clay is really well drained. Otherwise, and the flowers are slightly fragrant. I can't really tell you what the fragrance is, but it's quite subtle, but it's very pretty. So look out for the rhodohypoxis Beverley. It's well worth it. It's a really pretty new release that's come out this year. And it was grown by Touch of Class Plants, and I think it is a touch of class. So that's what we've got for today. All right, so that's the end of the show for this week. Make sure you hit the like button for us, will you please? Thank you so much for all of your questions today. And sorry if we didn't reach yours. We tried hard, but next time we'll include them in next week's live show. Shaylee, our fabulous producer, will send a message to our seed winners after today's show. We'll be back next Friday at 9 a.m. Western Standard Time. Remember, you can always jump onto our website and catch up on our previous stories from the Garden Gurus at thegardengurus.tv or our YouTube channel, thegardengurus.tv. Happy gardening, everyone. I hope it's a fabulous week and your fingernails get very dirty. Thanks.